Hey everyone, I'm Armor Gaming, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is the earth monster known as Hiroim The Tenacious. Hiroim is resistant like a fortress. Even when he's the last one standing against an entire army, he will never give up. He will never stop until he has won the battle. So here we have his different forms. When he was a child, when he was a teen, and his adult form. I really like this monster design. He looks really strong, really sturdy. I love that shield. His teenage form also looks pretty cool, so does the baby form. But now let's see if his stats are fitting to his character. His power is 3,201. And unfortunately, even though Hiroim may look really tough, this isn't a high power. In fact, out of the 17 Earth legendary monsters, this is second to last. And there are currently 17 Earth legendary monsters, so he's in 16th place. Not a good power stat at all. His life, however, is 34,683, which is a really high life. Because when you include every single legendary monster in the game, Hiroim the Tenacious's life is actually the second highest. And it's second only to Oros. And as for his speed, he has a speed of 3,476. Who would have thought that this tanky, heavy-looking monster would be so agile? In fact, he's officially the fastest Earth legendary monster. And even if we were to take into account every single monster, this is still a really fast speed. Because currently there are only 13 other monsters that have a faster base speed than this, and there's 9 other monsters that have this exact same speed. So whether we're talking about Earth monsters or every single monster, this is an insanely fast speed. So a quick little recap, he has a not so good power, he has an amazing life, and he has an even more amazing speed. And to top things off, he is a VIP monster, which means his trait is Bulwark. All status effects have a 50% less accuracy against all monsters of this unique cast. There's really not much to say, 50% immunity to every single negative effect, that's amazing. So now let's see how good this monster's skills are. For his default skills, we have Hiroim Charge and Far Shield. And oddly enough, this skill is called Far Shield, but it doesn't even give him a shield. But anyways, forget about the defaults, let's move on to his special. I Am Unstoppable. Deals insane special damage to all enemies. It's an AoE that deals 85 damage. Now, unfortunately for Hiroim, he doesn't necessarily have the highest power, so even though the special attack is really powerful, his power stat doesn't really help him out. And I actually don't really know how I feel about him having the special. You're gonna see that his skills are actually more supportive based than they are offensive. So it's nice that he has the special that deals an insane amount of damage, but on this monster, his best build is honestly not to even run any strength runes, it's to run all speed runes. So it's really a give and take. There is a hybrid build you can make, but for those of you that purchase this monster, I would strongly urge you to go for the more supportive / deny build. So anyways, there's no doubt that this is a good special, however I don't think it's a good special for this monster. I'm gonna breeze through skills group 1, we have Aegis, Stun, Earth Absorber, Distant Shield, nothing too special about all of these skills. So we're gonna go into skills group 2. In skills group 2, we have an attack called Power Shelter, deals massive special damage. It's 70 damage to a single enemy, costs 28 stamina, and it has no cooldown. So I think on the surface this skill looks amazing. Massive special damage, it's not earth damage, it's special damage which comes in handy in Team Wars. It's only 28 stamina and it has no cooldown, which means you can spam this skill over and over again. Now depending on the kind of build you want to run on this monster, you might potentially want to use this skill. If you make a more hybrid, more like tanky / attacker, you would run Power Shelter, but if you're going for the deny support build, I don't think you would need this skill. Some of you might feel more comfortable running this skill just so you can have an offensive attack, but I'll leave that up to you guys to decide. Next, he has a skill called Insuperable Fortification. Attacker will receive all single target attacks, requires cooldown. It's a skill that's applied to himself, it costs 25 stamina, and it has 3 turn cooldowns. And this skill gives protection. So if you're familiar with Oros, you would know that any monster that attacks using a single target hit, not an AoE, is going to be directed to you. And this skill I don't think is worth running. He has a better version of it in skills group 3. Plus, even though this monster is pretty tanky, he doesn't have any skills that recover his life. So if all attacks are coming to him, he's just going to be taking a lot of damage with no way to recover. His last skill in skills group 2 is called Perfect Armor. Gives a 100% shield to target, gives immunity to stun to ally, requires cooldown. So this targets a single teammate, it costs 27 stamina, it has a 3 turn cooldown, and it gives that teammate, you can use it on yourself too, but essentially you get full shield and you get stun immunity, which I think is great. One reason it's great is that lots of earth monsters tend to have stun skills. So if we think about Team Wars, because this monster is an earth monster, obviously if you're using him, your opponent's gonna have an earth monster, but because Hiroim the Tenacious is faster than every single earth monster, if you're running all speedruns, you're definitely gonna be going before the enemy earth monster, which means if you need to, you can give stun immunity to one of your other teammates to avoid getting stunned by the enemy, which is something you can do if you know that one of your enemies has a stun skill or an AoE stun skill, because keep in mind you have Bulwark, you have a 50% chance to ignore that stun, and that's just stun immunity. On top of that, you get a full life shield, so there's no way your partner is going to be dying, or yourself if you apply it to yourself. So then we move down to skills group 3. In skills group 3 we have a skill called Aegis Clash. deals low earth damage to all enemies, may daze all targets, requires cooldown. It's an AoE skill, meaning it attacks multiple enemies, it deals 30 damage, it costs 35 stamina, and it has a 3-turn cooldown. I think this is a skill that works really well on this monster, because this monster is so tanky, because he can give one of his teammates a 100% life shield, and because he can absorb attacks. So even though Hiroim might not have any life regeneration skills or any recovery life skills, reducing the enemy's damage output is a great way to stay alive. If you're leaning toward the deny supportive build, I really recommend this skill also. And next we have Adverse Fortification. Attacker will receive all single target attacks, returns all damage, requires cooldown. So it's another self skill that also costs 25 stamina, it has a 3-turn cooldown. It's basically an upgraded version of the skill from Skills Group 2, so not only do you get protection, at the same time you're also going to be returning all the damage you receive for those 2 turns. This monster can basically do what Oros does in 2 turns in 1 turn. Yeah, sure, Oros gives himself double life, but come on, this guy gives himself protection and returns all damage. So in Team Wars, if you were to start off with this monster, and you want to try to protect your common, your uncommon, your rare, you can start off with this skill and hopefully try to gravitate all of those single target hits to Hiroim The Tenacious instead of your weaker monster. However, if the enemy monsters do have an AoE skill, it's really not going to protect your weaker monster. Nonetheless, this is a fantastic skill, and the fact that he does what Oros does just makes it all the better. His last skill is Rampact Impact. Deals moderate earth damage, requires cooldown. It targets a single enemy with 45 damage, it costs 28 stamina, and it also has a 3-turn cooldown. And the great thing about this skill is that it mega stuns. No monster is immune to mega stun, of course with the exception of Timerion, and this immobilizes a monster for 2 whole turns. That's insane. So Brontes was the first monster to be able to do this. I'm not counting Reptile because Reptile's Mega Stun was a special skill, but Brontes had Mega Stun as a regular skill, and although Mega Stun was great when Brontes had it, it becomes even greater now that Hiroim The Tenacious has it, who like I said is the fastest earth monster. And it's specifically because of this skill and some other skills that you really should run 3 speedruns on him. Like I say in my other videos, Team Wars usually comes down to just 2 legendaries against 2 legendaries. That's because the third monster will be a rarity, and 80% of the time that third monster won't be a legendary, 60% of the time it won't be an epic or a legendary, which means that most of the time it's just going to be 2 legendaries versus 2 legendaries. So then it typically boils down to running a deny monster and running an attack monster. Now the cool thing about Team Wars is that you don't even need a deny monster that has an AoE skill. All you need is a deny monster that's faster than the enemy deny monster, and all you have to do is immobilize that deny monster to prevent that monster from immobilizing you. And then once that happens, hopefully your earth monster is strong enough to take out the enemy attacker in 1 hit, or maybe your attacker is at least faster than the enemy attacker and hopefully has some sort of deny skill to immobilize the enemy attacker, and then the game is pretty much yours and you've pretty much secured 3 coins. Now of course it doesn't always work in your favor. Sometimes it is better to have an AoE deny skill, sometimes your attacker doesn't have a deny skill himself or isn't strong enough to take out the enemy attacker, so then you still lose your common, your uncommon, your rare, but at the very least you can still secure 2 coins. And even if that isn't the case, sometimes it's better to take out the enemy deny monster. Even though it's immobilized, it's gonna get a turn next time, so sometimes it's better just to finish it off to get it out of the way, which means you end up losing your weaker monster. So going back to Hiroim, the fact that he has Mega Stun is amazing, because whatever monster you choose to deny, which usually will be the deny monster, it's going to be immobilized for 2 whole turns, which means you can focus on the enemy attacker. So first I'm going to talk about the supportive deny build I think everyone who gets this monster should run. You should be running all of Skills Group 3, Aegis Clash, Adverse Fortification, Rampact Impact, and Perfect Armor from Skills Group 2. As you can see, this skill set doesn't really have any offensive attacks. Perfect Armor deals no damage, Aegis Clash deals 30 damage but it's an AoE, Adverse Fortification, it deals no damage, however you do reflect all the damage you receive, so in a way it does deal damage. And Rampact Impact deals 45 damage. Again, not a lot of damage, but the purpose of this monster is essentially to run all speedruns and to go before the enemy deny monster to immobilize them. After you do Mega Stun on a monster, you would follow up the following turn with either AoE Daze or with Protection and returning all damage. Or if the enemy attacker was able to deal some damage, you would do Perfect Armor on whatever monster needs it. And if you're wondering why I'm choosing not to run Power Shelter, which is the 70 damage 0 cooldown skill, it's because this monster has a low base power and because he's going to be running all speedruns, which means even though the skill does 70 damage, it's not really going to be dealing that much. However, I will say if you're not convinced, if you still feel safer running this 70 damage skill, I will say you can probably eliminate either Perfect Armor or Aegis Clash. So if you're really passionate about wanting to run Power Shelter, I would say to replace it with one of these 2 skills, and I think I would lean towards replacing Aegis Clash. And that's because you have to try to imagine how a typical game will go. Almost always on turn 1, you're going to want to use Rampact Impact. So if you successfully do that, what are you going to want to do on the following turn? Because suppose your attacker goes and your attacker is able to take out the enemy attacker, well now they have a third monster who's probably a weak common, uncommon, or rare, and then they have a monster that's still immobilized for 1 more turn. So when it gets back to Hiroim's turn, are you really going to want to do an AoE Daze on a weak monster and on a monster that's still immobilized? Probably not in that scenario. You'd probably want to do Adverse Fortification just to protect your weaker monster if for some reason you don't manage to finish off the enemy deny and the weaker monster, or you'd probably just want to run Power Shelter to take out that weaker monster or to deal a little bit of damage on the enemy deny monster. However, let's just say that you know that your earth monster isn't strong enough to take out the enemy monster, and this is going to differ on a player to player basis. You would know this from previous wars, from previous experiences. If you don't have high enough runes on a monster, most likely you aren't going to be taking them out in one hit, in which case it might be useful to run Aegis Clash. So in the end you have to make that decision for yourself. But the two skills I will say you do need are Rampact Impact and Adverse Fortification. And you want to run all speed runes, the best speed runes you have. Now if you want to run a more secondary attacker slash supportive tank build, a build I really don't recommend, in which case there's many different rune sets you can do. You can run 1 strength, 1 life, 1 speed, or you can run 2 strength and 1 life, or you can run 2 strength and 1 speed. And the main difference in skill set is that the two skills you would want to run are Power Shelter and Rampact Impact. Rampact Impact in case you can't take out the monster in one hit, and Power Shelter of course because this is a more offensive build. As for the two other skills you would want to run on this build, it's kind of hard to say. Perfect Armor of course is a really nice tanky supportive skill, but obviously it deals no damage, which means if you're running 1 or 2 strength runes, they kind of become useless if you ever use the skill. And the same can be said for Adverse Fortification. This skill reflects all the damage you receive. It doesn't amplify it more if you have strength runes. And a very similar thing can be said for Aegis Clash. Sure, the strength runes would amplify the damage of the skill, but even with strength runes, unless they're really high level, I don't really see the skill being used that much, because sure, it dazes all 3 of the enemy monsters, but really Rampact Impact is just more superior. Mega Stun for 2 turns, that is gonna be crazy. And then after that, you'd probably follow up with a Power Shelter. But of course, like I said, at the end of the day, it's really up to you guys and what skills you want to use. And I'm actually curious to know what skill set you're going to use. So let me know in the comments below what skills you're going to run, what runes you're going to run, and also why. As for me, if I was to use this monster, like I said, I would give him all speed runes, and I would be running the skill set I discussed first. And with that being said, that concludes my analysis on Hiroim The Tenacious. Thank you to everyone who made it to the end of the video. I want to know if you guys like this monster, if you guys hate this monster, if you're going to be purchasing this monster, if you're not going to bother spending money on him, or just comment below whatever random thought pops into your head. With that being said, I hope everyone has a great day or a great night, depending what time you're listening to this video, and remember to dream big and pursue your passions.